Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome to the Property Couch podcast and welcome back to you, Ben, on this summer series. I reckon I feel like we're in fourth year, about to change into fifth. We have had some incredible stories.
We have Dee to start us off. We had Amy in there. We've had Michael. You know, there's Matt.
Dan and Amber. We've had Brad, Matt. And today's is a ripper story. We're chatting with Ricky. And this story is someone who, let's just say, their norm was to have consumer debt. That was just part of the psyche of growing up in their house. So I'm not going to tell too much more, Ben, because Ricky says it a lot better than I probably could.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah, this is a story that could have ended really badly, really badly. So let's go. Let's get into it.
Well, that's a good point, Ben, because this chat is in two parts. There's the bit at the beginning we chatted about, and then it changed gears and went somewhere else in the second part.
Yeah,
we weren't quite expecting. So, let's get to the chat that we had recently with Ricky. All right, Ben, we've got a very special guest today on our summer series. We're chatting with Ricky Comerford. First of all, welcome to the Property Couch, Ricky.
Thank you, Ben and Bryce. It's a privilege to be here.
Mate, we're excited to chat with you. There's a fair bit to unpack with your story, which is, I think it's going to be super exciting for our community. But so that they get a bit of a sense of who you are, Ricky, could you give us a bit of a sense of what it was like growing up for you with money? Were there conversations over the dinner table, and what lessons did you learn about money growing up?
Yeah, so whilst trying not to take away the incredible values and qualities that my parents have, like I had an amazing childhood, but in regards to money education, and they happy for me to say this, it's quite fair to say that the money education was quite unhealthy growing up. So yeah, around the dinner table and sort of growing up with that, the norm was mum and dad living paycheck to paycheck, and consumer debt, living off credit cards and personal loans. So that was my norm. And I also sort of seen with that the stresses that it placed on mum and dad's relationship. And that basically continued, sort of followed me into my early adulthood. I took those money habits on board and quickly got into consumer debt, sort of mid-20s, and then met my wife, and she sort of turned that around. She's a lot sort of better with money, and that's when it sort of turned around for me. Yeah.
Ricky, can I ask about back at that dinner table? Can you give us a sense of, did your family own their home, or were you renting? Or tell us basically, and then also share with us a bit about the day-to-day lifestyle that you were living, because as you said, your parents have given you a lot of great values, but one of them was a difficult one, was the money management value. So tell us a little bit more about that story.
Yeah, look, we didn't go without it all. Just everything that me and my four brothers, so there's five of us, and I'm the oldest, we didn't go without at all, but it was all sort of bought on credit. And in regards to the house, yeah, mum and dad haven't owned any properties. They're still renting. They're probably 8 to 10 years off retirement. And unfortunately, they know they'll go into retirement still renting, and not much, no assets other than the superannuation, which is quite minuscule. So, yeah, so that was, that's in regards to the property. So I didn't know anything about property. I didn't have any sort of mentors in regards to ownership of that and building that wealth base. But as I said, did not go without at all. Christmases were great. And, we had a caravan down in the Mornington Peninsula that we had a great family every sort of summer, family holidays down there. So definitely didn't go without. Just I was well aware that it was all done on credit.
You mentioned that it was putting stress on your mum and dad's relationships. How was that? Where was that showing up for you? What were you seeing as a kid where you could actually see the stress? Was it arguments? Was it sort of other sort of ways that came out? What was it for you?
Yeah, look, absolutely. There was there was a lot of arguments. Sort of verbal arguments were quite common, and one of the main ones was evolving around the stresses of the finances that was sort of coming out, and you just hear what goes on, so you know what they're arguing about. And me and my mum, I have a great relationship with both my parents, but me and mum were quite open with each other from quite early on. Me being the oldest son. Me and dad had all the sports, he was great. He took me to all my sports and he was a very active father. But me and mum sort of spoke more on a emotional level and spoke about, and we still do. She's great. And mum let me in quite early, probably a little bit too early, or way too early. Probably about 11, mum sort of would mention to me about the stresses that she was under financially and how, and as an 11-year-old, you sort of take that on. They would never, ever let me, just the type of parents they were. They really wanted me to finish my secondary school and whatnot. But, it was a common thought for me to really think, I just wanted to fix everything. It was just part of my personality. And it was quite common for me to think, should I step away from secondary school and get a job just to help out a bit?
And now the consequences of that are obviously ongoing for your parents, and you boys are going to have to keep an eye on that for them, and that's they'll have the pension as the safety net, but it's certainly that's the trade-off that they've experienced, and now you talk about taking that into your young adulthood. Tell us a little bit about that story in terms of with no money management training in behind you, no rule systems or anything like that. How did money start controlling you?
From the word sort of go, as soon as I was able to get credit, it was just a spiral down into consumer debt. So it's quite funny, actually. So the day I turned 18 and was eligible to get a credit card, it was on. I applied for a credit card, got it at 18, and the first thing I bought was a tattoo I've got on my bicep. So, and I absolutely hate it. I hate looking at it. At the time, it was tribal, and that was the in thing. But as far as visually, I don't like it. I absolutely love looking at it because it reminds me of where I've come from, how far I've come in regards to money. So, so that was the first purchase on credit, and then it just continued from there. Car finance, personal loan to go overseas and travel. And by the time I'd hit 25, I think I would have been in about $40,000 in consumer debt.
And what did you have to show for that?
Nothing. But the silver lining, my saving grace was that I was always a worker. I was always a hard worker, so the income was coming in, but it was just going out, and the debt was just continuing.
Chasing your tail. So you mentioned at the top there that, hey, listen, you paid respect to your parents with all the positive things that they did, but you also said that they would be okay. You talking about the money side. That kind of suggests that you've been having some conversations with them in your adult life around this. You said that your mum tapped you in at 11, but what conversations do you have with your parents now around money, particularly given that your narrative around money has changed? If you're at the dinner table now for a Sunday roast, what sort of conversations are you having? Are they open? Are they still a bit closed? Is it somewhere in between?
Yeah, somewhere in between. There's, as I learn more about, I love learning about economics and money management. And, me and my wife look at money management as a game, a game of numbers. And, we enjoy it. And my parents just want us to follow our passions, and they can see I light up when I talk about certain things about what I'm learning. And so in that aspect, it's really bonded us around the dinner table in regards to that, a good conversational piece. But there is also an element of fear that they've got. And what I've noticed, and why I believe talking about money is such a taboo subject, is because people are fearful of it. I didn't want to talk about it when I was in debt because it was scary. I knew I wasn't in a good position. And if someone was to talk about it, it come from fear, and I'd shut it down and change the subject. So there's an element still of that. But so it's pretty balanced in regards to the money talk now with my parents.
Look, it's an interesting topic, right? Because there's a fear element there and a trust element there, because money's controlled them all of their lives and it's got a hold of them. And there's also, and I don't want to speak for your parents, I don't know them, but it's obviously a challenging situation for them. But what I can say more generically and generally is that, it's a recognition of an element of one's life, and we're all human, right? That's the whole point of, who we are, and we're not all perfect. But there's also that failure element there, and a recognition and addressing of that particular element, that we haven't done any work on ourselves in that area.
Yeah.
So we don't really want to bring it up, because it's just an area that has a pain and that element attached to it as well. So I think that's a good lesson for our community around why it can be so challenging. Hey, I want to just quickly ask about your brothers then now, because obviously you're the oldest. Do you get a chance to potentially, share some of those experiences that you're having and trying to get them on a similar pathway to you? Because one of the great things that we know about you, Ricky, is you've got time. That is your element that's your basically superpower, is the time you've still got available in your accumulation phase, and your brothers are in a similar position. So I'm interested to see what the dialogue's happening around that part of the dinner table as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, so my 4 younger brothers, we're also best mates, which is great. That's something that my parents gave us as well. And what I've learned is, because I'm so passionate about when I learn about things, I've noticed, and it comes out of love. It comes out of just wanting to improve other people, especially my brothers, because they're so close to me. So what I noticed was I was quite, not pushy, but I was quite invasive, sort of just pushing what I was learning onto them. And it was just, one, I was passionate about where I was headed, and 2, I just wanted to bring them along with the journey and get them up. But what I learned was, words are one thing, and to push something onto someone, it can be a bit, they get quite defensive. So what I learned and what they taught me, and what I'm going to take that into me teaching my kids as they grow up, is I want to lead by example, not just talk about it, but if I do it and then they start to see, oh, hang on, he's bought a couple of investment properties here, and he's tracking all right, he's going on holidays every couple of years, there's something here. So I find, if I lead by example, then I think that's the best form of teaching others.
Totally. And it comes from a position of contribution, comes from a position of care. And that's obviously the biggest value your parents have given you around love, support, nurturing in that family unit, that you all have each other's backs. And I think that's super cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Ricky, one of my mentors said to me, a man with an experience is never at the mercy of a man with a theory. And I think that you're walking the talk on that, because you can play this lip service to your brothers and say, this is what you should do, this is what you should do, this is what you should do, right? But everyone's got an opinion. But it's not until you actually walk the path and do it yourself and go through all the emotions of buying an investment property and the fear that might rise up, some of the conditioned fear that you had growing up, and some of that stuff when you're an 11-year-old, when your mum was tapping you into the discussions, and some of the, the fact that you need to fix it, and so some of that coming into your brothers, I need to fix it, which is innate in who you are. But quite often, actions speak louder than words, right? So you get to model success and model these behaviours that they can just say, well, my big brother's done it. He's someone that we can lean on and get that experience. And I think that's a, Ben said contribution before. I think it's a really good legacy that you can pass on to your family, which is amazing. So my next question for you is, you got a job, you saw all this experience as you were growing up. You were, whether we like it or not, it conditions us and it's how we view the world. Then you get your first job. I'm not sure if the first job preceded the tattoo or after the tattoo, because you got the credit card at 18. But talk us through first job, what budgets look like, easy come, easy go. What did money flow look like for you as you sort of were moving from being under mum and dad's roof to starting to create that independence for yourself?
Yeah, so I had a job quite early, sort of, I don't know what the minimum age for getting a job was back then, but it was then. I got a job. I played a bit of indoor soccer in that sort of mid-teens, and my first job was refereeing indoor soccer and indoor cricket. And that was great. That was my introduction to work, and I really enjoyed it. The money come in, so now I had an income, but it just went out straight away. Like day one, it was gone. So yeah, I knew the payday, and I knew before I even got paid what it was going to be spent on. I sort of jumped around a few jobs just casually while I was studying. And then when I finished secondary school, my first main job, full-time job, was at a surf store. So I'd often got my license, and I'd often go surfing and whatnot down the Surf Coast, which I live down there now, and made my way up in the surf retail to management. And then it sort of got 5 years in, and I was getting a little bit bored, wanted a bit of a change. And it just happened that a family friend were in a bonfire just at an event, and we were just having a chat. And I was saying, I want to sort of have a bit of a change. I've gone for the fire brigade. The emergency services was always in the back of my mind quite early. And I went for the fire brigade at 18 and didn't make it through the process, and also the police force. So I went through that and didn't make it through that. And she mentioned the private sector of the ambulance service, and she said, "You'd be great. I think it'll be something you really want to look at." So within a couple of weeks, I'd signed up and studied it. It was only a 2-week course to sort of learn how to drive an ambulance and a couple of basic sort of medical, clinical education. And I was straight into a job working full-time for the private ambulance service, which a lot of people don't know exists. So when everybody thinks, ambulance, it's all about sort of paramedics and that. But there is so much work behind the scenes with the non-emergency ambulance service. They're fantastic. They work tirelessly, and they do a lot of the intra-hospital transfers, and they also go out to 000 calls, the lower acuity ones. So within that, and made my way up to working in the private sector of the ambulance, and I absolutely loved it. And I just decided sort of 3 years in, that I'd study. I'd go and study paramedicine. It's what I wanted to do. So I finished the degree while I was working and pivoted into the emergency side, where I've been ever since for 6 years. I was lucky enough to get transferred not long after my graduate year down the Surf Coast, where I'm a paramedic, down near your way, Bryce, I think.
Yeah.
So, fingers crossed I don't have to come to you, but if I do, I promise.
Yeah, let's meet on different circumstances. That'd be better.
So here you are. You've got as you said, you're a hard worker, so you always knew that you could bring the income in. You got $40,000 in basically consumer debt. You've now got your paramedics position. Tell us about what's happening in your personal life at this time. What's going on in your personal life, and have you got to the stage yet where you're ready to address that debt issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So during the 5 years in the non-emergency ambulance sector, the debt consumption was just continuing, and it was sort of at its peak towards the end of that when I pivoted into paramedicine, so the emerge side. And during that time, personal life, I had met somebody who was great, and we got married, but it was quite rushed, and that was that. But she sort of had a career path that she was chasing, and then I was having my career path because I'd started studying the paramedicine. And it took us to different parts of Victoria. So she worked down at the Grampians, and because we didn't have the foundation sort of set, because everything was quite rushed, that sort of fell away. So I got divorced, and it wasn't sort of too long after that I sort of pivoted into the Emerge side. It sort of all happened in a year where I met my wife, Lindsay, now. And look, from the word go, it was just a different ball game for me. The biggest thing that me and my wife have, we're a team. Nothing's off the table that we speak about. And we have 2 daughters now. And Lindsay, my wife, she comes from a really good money education background with her parents. You know, they'd invested in properties and shares. And so she had that, and she had that really good money management. You know, she had a budget. She introduced me to a budget. It was non-existent before I met Lindsay. Yeah, so once she got me into gear and budgeting, I quickly brought down that debt and completely got rid of it. And the day I got out of debt and paid that last bit of personal debt off, it was like I'd stepped out of the matrix. It was like, oh my gosh, is this how the other half live? As soon as I got out of debt, and now I've actually got some surplus, and at that time we had a combined joint accounts, me and my wife. Straight away we put it to work, and yeah, it's been a good journey from there.
So how did you put it to work? Is that get the debt out of the way, the personal debt done, and then start to look to invest?
Yeah, so at the time it was just get rid of the debt, but I didn't know about investing or anything. So that wasn't in my mind when we were getting rid of that debt. Basically, the only goal was just to get debt free. And I didn't know what to do from then. But what it came down to was it was really good timing. So I was working with an older paramedic who, at the time, for a month, on the day before a shift, where I paid off my last bit of consumer debt. So I'm debt free, and I'm like, holy cow, now my pays, I'm going to have some surplus after expenses. And
go and get a second tattoo?
Yeah, no, that wasn't the case. Tattoos were done by then, no more. I was excited, and I'm in a privileged position as a paramedic because you're with somebody else, another paramedic, in this tiny ambulance for 10 to 14-hour shifts. So you talk about a lot. You talk a lot about personal stuff. It's a really privileged position. And I take that on board, and I ask the older paramedics that I work with, or not even the older, just all paramedics, I'm like, I want to learn from them. You know, they've got a lot of experience, and I'm in this privileged position in the back of an ambulance for 10 to 14 hours. And we talk a lot. I want to learn from him. So luckily he loved shares. He was sort of investing in Australian shares, you know, banking shares and whatnot. So he introduced me to this. He lent me a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So I read the book and loved it. It really struck a chord with me because I was like, oh, hang on. I've got surplus here. I can put this to work and I can grow this. I did a bit of research with shares because that's what he introduced me to. And I come across a community, you know, through the social medias and whatnot, called the FIRE community. I don't know if you've heard about it, the FIRE community. Yeah. So it's a bit of a buzzword, a bit of an acronym.
Mr. Mustache, Money Mustache.
That's the one, yeah. Financial independent, retire early.
Yep.
So I really got stuck into that, and basically I adopted what they were doing. And the goal was to bring down our expenses as much as possible, invest the surplus into index funds on the share market. So just low cost index funds. And so we had 3 funds that we were putting all of our surplus into. And, you know, we'll track in the top 200 companies of Australia. We'll track in the top 500 companies in America, and then the rest of the world, Europe and Asia and emerging markets. So we had these 3 funds that we were just putting all of our surplus in, every single bit of it. And that's quite a conservative, as far as share investing, it's not stock picking, you know, it's quite a conservative asset class in regards to the share market. So we were tracking along. So the plan was for us to rent vest. We were just renting, and we were happy renting. We had a rental out at Ocean Grove. I was working, and we were just investing all that surplus into index funds. And the plan was when the kids were sort of older, 30s, we'd just live off the dividends, walk off the job and live off the dividends. So that was great. until sort of 1 week, I started running the numbers if we bought a house and what would be my mortgage repayments versus the rent that we're paying. And look, we had quite a big house that we didn't need in Ocean Grove. And essentially the mortgage repayments and the running costs versus the rent we were paying was quite equal. I was like, what are we doing? So went out, had a date with Lindsay, explained to her, because that's what I do. I'd often do. I'm a real researcher, so I'd research all this and give Lindsay the summary of what I was learning, and she loves it. She's great, and that's what I mean by we're a team. But she just wants the summary version. So often I'd go off on a tangent, say, pull me back if we're off on a tangent. She often has to as well. Yeah, so I sort of told her, and she's like, let's do it. What are we doing? So obviously it was going to be a bit of a downgrade from the house we were living in. So we went off and went to a mortgage broker, and next thing we knew, we had a mortgage, and we built. So we're building down Armstrong Creekway, and we're moving next week actually. So
congratulations.
So that was, yeah, thanks guys. So that was that. We're excited. We've been living with the parents for 6 months, and I love them, but everyone's on top of each other. So
we all got parents, mate. We get it.
Yeah.
Hey, so there's a fair bit there we can go into, right? So, but there's a couple of things for me, right? Lindsay's clearly a good influence on you. So how did those worlds come together? Because your normal would have been credit, and her normal would have been a bit more fiscal rigor around budgets and all those sorts of things. Was there any clunk when you came together, or was it easy for you to go, I'm on board, that's just modeling something that I've always wanted, I didn't know how to have that in my world?
Yeah.
Easy or hard to merge?
Look, I'm going to say it was easy, but only because when the first day I met her, I was just, met her at a bar, and we had a conversation, and I was infatuated from day one. So I was quite easily influenced by whatever she was doing, I'll do. And sort of, we were dating for quite a while, and then we moved in with each other, and that's when we combined our sort of money. And, still am, but the early stage, the honeymoon stage, I was just infatuated, and I was just like, whatever you're doing, I'll do. I'm happy. I'm easy. I'm simple. I'll work and we'll do that. And I said, I want to get rid of this debt first and foremost. She's like, cool, let's do it. Let's do a budget. And her sister's great. She's a Excel master. She just loves it. She loves spreadsheets. She lives her life by spreadsheets. You should see her folders all around her house. But she drew us up a budget, and we went straight into it and paid off the debt. It took a couple of years, but we got there. And now that I was debt free, I was just so excited to money. It wasn't fearful for me anymore. It was exciting. And that's why I sort of done the deep diving into all these investment classes and decided on that.
So Ricky, it sounds like life's gone great, right? You've had this backstory of growing up where consumer debt, then you rolled into that in your own life, and then you're obviously tenacious, and you paved this way of your career. Sadly, your first marriage didn't work, but it's worked out great for your second marriage. You bought a house, so everything's going super well for you. What's the next step? It sounds like you pay off the home, you get the surplus. Everything's going pretty good for you. Was there anything that you needed to change, or was there anything happening in your world that would potentially derail that?
There was always an underlying I suffered a lot of anxiety from earlier on as a kid, and that was always simmering sort of under. And I thought I was managing it quite well because I was quite motivated, and I had a lot of good habits in regards to motivating myself and looking forward. But I wasn't quite addressing that underlying sort of anxiety. And, being in the job that I'm in and the emergencies that I go to, you really need to have that in check. You really need to sort of stay on top of that mental health and put in mental health habits to really, because unfortunately a byproduct of what I do, which is such a privileged job, is we've got a lot of paramedics out on, with post-traumatic stress disorder. And so I always knew that it could be one job that caused that. and that could derail this amazing plan that I've got. That was always in the back of my mind, and that happened during the pandemic. It lasted for 4 months. I had a as a result of a job that I went to one night, it created a quick spiral into a quite a severe mental health crisis that I had that lasted 4 months. Now, looking back, the hardest 4 months of my entire life. But looking back, it was the best. And I know that sounds crazy to some people, but the tools that I learned from that, I'm able to use that going forward to tackle any challenge.
So that's pretty serious, Ricky, in terms of you're having this event. I mean, tell us a little bit about what it felt like in that moment through that time, in terms of how you would or you know how you were going to get through it. And then secondly on that, given, I mean, I suffer from anxiety as well, probably a lot better in my older age than what I was when I was younger at your age. Tell us also about some of those tools that you've developed. I think that's a good story for our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to talk about it because, it's something that I share because I really want to help sort of others and take away anything that helps for me is great. So it happened quite quickly after a job that initiated a quick spiral down into, and I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and acute severe anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, and acute severe depression. So it lasted for 4 months. Now the first 2 months was horrendous. I was in the thick of it. That's when it was at its worst, and we were living in the rental up at Ocean Grove, and me and my wife would, track along so fine. I'd just come off annual leave, and we had such a good time. And it was just after the first lockdown, so the pandemic was happening, and that was obviously a scary time. Initially, it's still scary, of course, but no one knew too much about it. So the way I was quite motivated, but I was a bull out of the gate with everything I did. I was 100% in trying to be the best paramedic, 100% trying to be the best father, the best husband, the best son to my, the best brother. And all of that, there was no balance. I was just burning the candle at both ends. And unfortunately, this job that I went to was basically the straw that broke the camel's back. And within days, I was riddled down to a shell of my former self, like within days. And it was quite severe. So it's something I'd never, ever thought I would ever think, but the mornings were the worst. And it was quite common for that first 2 months. I'd wake up with suicidal thoughts in the morning. Now, the mornings were so hard because during that time, it was just a battle. Every single minute was a battle to get through. I was in survival mode. I was just fight or flight for 2 months. And, I'd wake up and I'd see this full day ahead of me that I had to get through minute by minute. And it was too daunting. So the first thing that I developed was that I had to develop when I was in the thick of it was I needed a strong enough why of something to anchor me and bring me back down and be like, why do I need to survive this? Why do I need to get better? And the strong enough why that I had that I found was my daughter. So Lindsay was pregnant at the time with our second, and so I had my daughter, and it was hard because there was a lot of guilt, a lot of that mental breakdown. I had a lot of guilt of I felt like I couldn't be the same father I was and same husband, and that killed me. That was the biggest thing, the guilt that I felt. But in saying that, I needed a strong enough why. So what I had was I had a picture in a frame of my daughter, and it's a beautiful picture. It was when she was 6 months, and she's sitting on my lap, and she's looking up at a camera that my wife took a picture of at a cafe one morning. So I had that on my bedside table. So every morning I'd wake up, and just to get me out of bed and giving me that strong enough why, I'd look over at the picture. It was hard, but it gave me just that motivation just to get out of bed and jump in the shower. Now, something that I developed, which is what I call now the 1% rule. Now, I haven't reinvented the wheel. This is something that I learned, and it's called something different in different aspects. So sports people call it the little win mentality. Economists call it compounding interest, I guess. But I call it the 1% rule. So what I did, I'm a real visual person, and I need to visualize things just to understand things. So what I did every morning after sort of looking at that picture of my daughter and getting me out of bed, what I would do was I would put a percentage of my overall mental health on from 0 to 100% and how I was feeling. And obviously the mornings were bad. So let's just say I'd wake up and I'd be like, okay, how am I feeling right now? I'm a 10% because it was bad. I'm a 10% out of 100. And what I would do is I would do things that even if it would add 1% to increase my overall health, I would do it. So I did a lot of cold water therapy. So I'd jump in and have a warm shower, but after every shower, I'd finish off with a cold shower for the last sort of 30 seconds. And it was great. I'd feel great afterwards. I'd get out. So if that added 2% to my 10% or whatever I calculate, that's fine. I would do it. And I would just keep stacking on, doing everything possible that would stack on these 1%ers that I'd call. And what I found was, everything. I'd go for a run or I'd go for a surf. I'd journal. I'd meditate. I'd do yoga. I'd read a book. I read a lot of autobiography books. And all of these were adding these percentages to my day. And what I was finding was that I was like, hang on, 2 months in, that's when it started to turn for me. I was like, hang on, I'm actually turning around my day here. It was giving me the courage. It was giving me the understanding that, hang on, I'm actually giving myself the power of turning these days around. And that was the kicker for me. Just, it was a couple of weeks where I'd be looking at how I was turning around these days, and it just went up from there. And I still use this today, every single day. This 1% rule that I wake up, I'll measure my percent on my mental health, physical health, money management health, and I'd just stack on those percentages, and you'd be amazed how the small little incremental increases, how much they are, they help.
There's some good tips there for people for takeaways too, Ricky. Can I, because it's such an important topic, right? We've kind of pivoted from money to mental health, which I think is really important here. For someone who is maybe redlining but not seeing the signs, what takeaway or what lessons could you offer to someone who's listening to this, who knows someone who's actually experiencing the same thing that you're experiencing? As you got to that experience that triggered it for you, was it the visual that you saw that triggered it for you, or was it the accumulation of everything that was going on that just a routine thing for you in your job triggered it? Because I'm trying to find the opportunity here for our community who are listening to this to maybe not get to the edge that you did. And clearly your strategy to get out is remarkable. But maybe if we could help someone who's at 11 o'clock, who's almost at midnight on this sort of stuff, what were some of the signs that you probably felt that you didn't acknowledge, and to help people see that might be a flag for them to do something before it gets to the place that you got to?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked, because so beforehand, I just had no balance, and it seemed like it happened overnight. But what we later learnt was that no, it was a simmering. There was a simmering sort of thing there. The pressures from work, the pressures I was putting on myself in all these different aspects. Like I said, pressures of being the best paramedic, pressures of being the best father. They were just sitting there simmering, and I wasn't listening to my body. I wasn't. The signs were there, I'd feel my heart rate go up, and I'd feel myself sort of getting stressed, but I wasn't listening to it because I just wanted to keep going and going and going. So, I like analogies, and Bryce, I know you like your analogies as well. So one thing that I want to, let the community know if they're at that 11th hour is, I want you to look at your overall life, holistically, whether that's, financially, mentally, and physically, as a machine. Now, inside that machine is a bunch of cogs that work. And some are bigger than others, which what I mean by that is one cog will be my kids, one cog will be my job, one cog will be my mates, one cog will be, whatever it is, my education, things that I'm working on. One cog will be the hobbies that I've got, surfing or running. But I'd be forgetting about all those other cogs. And for the machine to work efficiently, you need to oil all the different cogs. Now, what I was doing is, there was just no balance. So I'd be putting all of 100% of my energy into, trying to fix one aspect if it needed fixing. And what I mean by that, there was just no listening to the signs. I was just a bullet out of the gate. And that was that. So it's important to listen to those signs. Our body's incredible, and it gives off signs. Our heart rate increases when we're stressed. Our thoughts get a bit scattered, we lose sleep. It's important for us to listen to those, because they do, if you don't keep them in check and you don't sort of sort it out and keep it going, it can get to a real severe issue where you just have something like I did, which was the straw that broke the camel's back. And that's what happened.
Ricky, I can tell you my story where I was in my early 20s, and I've always had this future orientation, this view. I wanted to get to the next stage of my life quicker than it was coming. And so I was rushing there as well. And so for me, it led to, mental challenges in my early 20s when I went and got some professional help in terms of trying to resurrect or address that anxiety piece. So I went and saw a psych for a good 6 months there to try and address, because one of the challenges you have when you are future orientated and you're aspiring to be the best version of yourself and so forth, is you can take that to the extreme, and that's not healthy either. Getting that balance in the middle is also right. So I think there's a lot in there in terms of what you've just shared, and I know from my point of view, whenever someone is leaning into me around those types of conversations, I always say one of the best things I ever did was to go and get some professional advice in that space, because they can help you understand it better, and they can help you with techniques to address it. And I've never looked back from those sessions that I had and the work that I did in that time, because you're right, you just feel like the world's on your shoulders, and all the expectations there, and usually it's your own expectation in terms of what you put on yourself. So I learned a lot from that exercise and come out the other side obviously better and stronger in terms of dealing with that. So thank you for sharing that part of the story in the mental health space. I'm keen to now, we're not sort of taking away the critical importance of that, because let's also never forget that your health is your wealth, right? Number one. Let's talk now about the financial impact and what that meant around the reset, considering that you've got a period of time there where you're on stress leave or work cover or whatever. What's going on around those future plans and those intentions around money and wealth creation?
Yeah, so in the thick of it, sort of during that 4 months, everything was sort of, my wife was great. She sort of took over all of that. There wasn't any automation in our finances. We were doing it sort of on the fly, and she sort of took over all of that just to allow me to recover. So money during that 4 months, in all honesty, money wasn't even part of my, I wasn't even thinking about that. It was just survival and getting, but when I come out of it and I slowly got back to work and got back full time, and continued these things that I was doing, the 1% rule and all the things every day, the journaling, the meditation, the yoga, continuing all of that. I loved my job much more. I just felt like I could operate so much better, just the way I was doing things, those habits that I was forming. And then I started getting back into the finances, what I was incredibly passionate about before the mental health breakdown. We didn't sign the contract. We didn't have a house before the mental health crisis. This all happened afterwards. We were sort of just rent vesting. But after that, that's when I ran the numbers on one day on renting versus the mortgage repayments, and that's when we pulled the trigger on buying our primary place of residence or building. Then, so what happened from then was I started thinking, okay, I still love shares. I've got this primary place of residence. How can I leverage that house into building more of a share portfolio? Building that. How can I use this house? It has to be a way. So I come across in my research a thing called debt recycling, and I asked the question on a forum on sort of a couple of investment sites that I was following. And just to summarize, so debt recycling is basically having my primary place of residence and then using that security against a investment loan to purchase whatever shares you want, and then using the dividends to point at your mortgage, bring that down, and then just recycle, rinse and repeat.
Yep. Yeah. And just for the audience benefit, but effectively what's happening is you're using the equity that you've got in your home to, as you pay that debt down, so just so we can bring everyone along on this journey, Ricky, you're paying that debt down and then you're releasing a new loan or a new split out of that, which basically then becomes deductible because it's for investment purposes. And then you're putting that money into shares with a high dividend payout, which is then basically coming into your offset, and then you're paying it into the loan on your principal. And so that's accelerating the pay down of the debt, but you're also getting the benefit of that money working harder for you. I think that summarizes that situation. Now, keep going, please. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, perfect. And as I sort of continue on how we pivoted into property and how we discovered you guys, the Property Couch, was I just think it's important to highlight that mine and my wife's comfort with debt was good. We had a big risk profile. Now, I only say that because I lived. So what I did was I discovered that I categorized debt into 3 categories. So good debt, neutral debt, and bad debt. And I lived both sides of that because as what we spoke about with the consumer debt. So I knew the differences. And in knowing that difference, the good debt, the investment, and obviously that comes with risk. I'm not taking that away, but the good debt, we were very comfortable with that. So I think it's just important to highlight that. So basically that was I put it out there. What's this debt recycling about? And I had one of the members of one of the groups reach out to me and said, hey, it sounds like you've just bought this property and you're heavily, your asset class is shares, which is great. That's fine. I just thought I'd flick this over for you to read, and it was your binge guide. Okay. The Property Couch binge guide. Well, it was a link to download your to sign up and get your binge guide. So I read that over a couple of nights and loved it. So it was something I didn't know about. And at this stage, I had a vested interest now because I had a mortgage, I had a property that we were building. And I always say that the best motivation to learn something is to be even just minorly invested in it, because you've got a vested interest in it.
Agreed. Because you did that with your shares in the fund, the 3 funds that you were doing as well. Because then once you're in, then your accumulation of knowledge was on a rapid pace because you had the skin in the game. So I noticed that when you were telling that story before. Yeah,
100%. And so that's what I did with the property. So I read that, loved it, and I joined up to one of your webinars and watched one of your webinars, and I'm like, oh, hang on here. There's something in this, property investing. I'm really liking this. And look, the number one thing for me for making that pivot from shares to property is leverage. With shares, look, there's ways to leverage with shares, but it wasn't part of my risk profile. So, I know you can get margin loans and whatnot, but it was something I didn't want to touch. And, I just love the idea of leverage. If I can, line up all my eggs, the cash on cash return is much better if I'm using someone else's money, the bank's money to grow my wealth. So it was leverage. And then I discovered the podcast, obviously, you talk about in the webinar and the binge guide, I knew about the podcast and I did what you said. And I started from episode 1. And Bryce, you told me, listen at 1.5 speeds. That's awesome. 1.5.
You know how many people say, "Oh, there's Bryce again at the end of the podcast. He keeps banging on about me going back to episode 1," and then they reach into me, they write into me, and they go, "Oh, actually, I dismissed that a fair bit, but now I'm glad in the end I actually didn't go back to episode 1 to 20 and do that." So yeah, thanks for listening.
I was taken back. I was taken back when I seen the 300 and something episodes. I was like, oh my god,
a fair bit to go. Me and Ben had no chemistry back then. We've only got minor chemistry these days, but but the knowledge is important. So you went back to the first 20, and then because clearly we say that if you want to get the best experience out of listening to our podcasts, you got to listen to those first 20 to get the foundational principles. So you heard those and they resonated?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the biggest thing that you guys taught me early on. Now, before discovering your podcast, I had a lot of trust issues with advice, financial advice. I loved reading, and I knew I liked finances and economics, and I read a book about the Hayne Royal Commission. So I knew the poor reputation that Australian financial advice had, and also I had people around me now that I was investing saying, "What are you doing? You can do everything yourself. You're a researcher. Do everything yourself. You don't need why are you paying to get advice?" And listening to your podcast, you really made me realize the importance of having a good advisory team behind you. So my main focus there was, and I know you're trying to separating Sprickers to good property advice, and I love that. And you made me realize that, hang on, there is something important here of, because all the greatest people, business people and people that grow their wealth have a team behind them, have a good advisory team. So I understand the importance for that. So my next research, sort of a good team, a good tax accountant, a good buyer's agent, a good property advisor. And that's when I reached out to your company, and I wanted a plan in place. I wanted a good plan because I didn't know much. Obviously, I had good money habits, and I knew what was coming in and what was going out with the budget. We were trapping our surplus. We knew we wanted to put it to work, but it was all retrospective. It was all of what we were previously planning on, like bills and stuff. We hadn't looked ahead. There was no provisioning for looking ahead. There was no, I know that eventually we're going to have to replace our cars. I know that eventually our kids are going to be going to primary school and there's going to be increased expenses there, but there was no looking ahead. It was all retrospective. There was no planning for that. So now, after getting that plan done, and I know it sounds cliche, but I'm recycling what you say on your podcast a few times, is what that plan did for us was it made the invisible visible. So now we know ahead everything. And the conversations that I have with people at work, and, because as I said, I'm in a privileged position where we talk about a lot with our partners in the back of an ambulance for 10 to 14 hours. And there's a lot of paramedics out there that are sort of creeping up and sort of wanting to invest and whatnot. So we talk about that, and they're like, "Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing with your money?" And I'm like, "Oh, we were shares, and now we're pivoting into property, and we're going to build a property portfolio plan and whatnot." And I said, "Oh, we've got this plan," because before the plan, it was just one property at a time. We had no idea how much we could afford, how many we needed. We were just guessing about provisioning for the expenses, managing those property and whatnot. We had no idea. It was just go with the flow. Let's just go with the flow.
So, Ricky, what does it feel like to have the invisible visible now? What does that mean to the everyday life for you and Lindsay to actually be able to look over the horizon and plan some of those future events and be methodically and consciously walking towards knowing what's coming up for you with full visibility?
Oh, it's incredible. It's just knowing, just the plan looking ahead, and just knowing in detail what we're doing of the unknown. And look, I'll tell you something. So when I talk about this plan, what often gets mentioned in society, people don't like plans, I've noticed. Now, the reason for that is they think having a plan is boring and it takes away spontaneity. Is that even a word? Spontaneity?
Yeah, spontaneity.
Spontaneity. There we go. So I found that they think it's boring and it lacks that spontaneity. But what I discovered with the plan is we're actually more spontaneous because now we provision for things that are important for us in our provision sort of bucket of, and that being travel. And obviously with the lockdowns, the last year and a half there's been a big lack of that. So it was only my last annual leave sort of 4 weeks ago. We had money sitting in there in the provision. We hadn't been using it because of the lockdowns, and we're regional, so it was like, okay, hang on, and we made a spontaneous decision to just take off to Bright, up at Victoria, and we
Beautiful.
So what I'm saying is we're more spontaneous having that plan, and it's great.
Well, it gives you the freedom to have to know that when everything else is in order, this little portion of what you've got is okay for you to spend. It's okay for you to be spontaneous with, which is really cool. So, hey, Ricky, we've covered a lot of ground here, mate. We talked about a backstory that had consumer debt, was around renting and not owning property, to then going through you transferring that from your parents to yourself, having your initial partnership that didn't work, and some real awareness around, like you said to me, that there was no foundation set early, and that's why that didn't, like, just having that awareness around that relationship is something that people could take away from.
Yeah.
Then you found Lindsay, which has been a massive positive in your life. And then everything's going great. And then you hit a very significant roadblock in your life around mental health and the challenges, and also what it takes to actually go through that and come to the other side. And then now we're at a place where you, with all that in the rear vision mirror for you, you have this bright future looking forward because you're now in control of your money. You've made the invisible visible, and you have an opportunity to really go forward with some certainty, and clearly for you, you're wanting to contribute to other people to bring them along for the ride. So my final question for you is this: with all that as a backdrop, as we get to the point where you now have this sense of financial peace, which is the mission that Ben and I are on, to help people get that sense of financial peace, you organize and manage your money, you trap more surplus. What's it going to feel like to you when you mentioned you've got young daughters, and so they start to get to the point where they're at the dinner table with you, they're in Ocean Grove, you've just come back from a surf, hanging out, or from some travel, and then you're having conversations around money and the positivity and the charting of their future based on what you're going to. How does that make you feel to know that you're going to set them on a path that's actually different to the path that you've been on, with all of the twists and turns in your past? How's it going to feel for you and Lindsay knowing that you'll be able to pass that legacy on to your kids?
Oh, it's incredible. And family is everything to us, and our kids are just everything to us, and it feels incredible that we're going to be able to pass out on that legacy and teach them from the word go. For sure.
Mate, all kudos to you. At the end of the day, if I look at the 7 grades of financial well-being, there's this movement that you've made basically through those grades, and now you're sitting in financial control, and the next one is obviously financial peace and then financial contribution. You're playing a bit of that contribution role in terms of sharing that story today, which is awesome. My final question, and I know we're well over time, but I'm just loving this conversation, so I'm going here anyway. Money Smarts. You had the provisional data that you talked about before, but I'm really interested in that quick transition from a summary of how you went from budgeting to now being in sort of adopting the Money Smarts principles and using the platform to do that.
Yeah. So it's such user-friendly, and I do it a little bit different, and I know you're going to hate this because I said that we it's a bit of a game of finances for us at this stage. It's not as automated as what we probably should. We give ourselves the 7-day float. I love that everything's so visual. You've got the graphs. I love pie charts. It's colourful. Everything's there. But we use the credit card for everything.
Yep.
And I know we shouldn't, but because we're so on top of it at this stage in our life, we use it for everything and let it sit in the offset, our money in the offset for as long as possible. And then obviously do the balance sweep. So we never pay any interest. But I just love the usability of it and the tracking. The monthly tracking has been huge. We never tracked anything. So that's been the biggest thing for us, the tracking every month.
Awesome. So you don't have to track all of the 7-day float stuff, but you're just tracking the provisional stuff, and it gives you an idea for that spontaneity that you talked about, that trip to Bright out of the holiday jar in terms of the holiday provision that you've got there. So that's cool. So look, that's the piece for me in terms of, as we started the Money Smarts as a rules-based principle. Some people don't have the discipline with the credit card. You're obviously really comfortable that you do have the discipline with the credit card. So you've gone to the next level in regards to how some people use the tool and the system. So, all kudos to you again, mate, in terms of, what you've done. And also thank you for sharing that story. It is absolutely a classic story of, if it is to be, it's up to me. You're taking ownership of the situation that you're in. You're recognizing your weaknesses. You're getting educated in terms of how you address those weaknesses, and then you're putting it into action. So, I mean, it is the true story and exactly what we want in these summer series and in terms of what we're sharing. So, mate, thank you so much for being so brave and honest in sharing what you've shared with us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for what you both do and the team behind you. So
it's a pleasure, Ricky. As just to add to Ben's point, you will be surprised. Well, you may not be surprised now. We're doing a summer series for some time, but there is something you said. There is a phrase that you did, a sentence you made. There is a point somewhere along your story that's just triggered someone in a positive way, so that they don't end up in a place that you did, because you were so brave to, mate. You were super transparent today. So that is incredible courage anyway. So I'm going to reinforce exactly what Ben just said. It's incredible that you came on to the podcast, and the summer series is all about people hearing stories about other people implementing the frameworks that we talk about. And thanks for the little plug too, by the way, for everyone to go back to episode 1 to 20, because I'm at the end of every episode trying to get everyone to do it. Probably no one's done it. They're going to hear you saying it, and they'll probably go and do it. So I appreciate that.
I continue that. Yeah, it's a good tip. Hey, I know we're over time. This will be super quick. Can I finish it off by hijacking your mindset minute, Bryce?
Yeah, you bet. Can you do it for the next 52 weeks as well?
Oh, mate, probably not. Now, listen, I just finished reading Bear Grylls' first autobiography, and he mentioned in there something that really resonated with me, and I think it'll resonate with a lot of people going through the pandemic. 2020 was quite tough, and 2021. So what he says, and look, I haven't fact-checked this, so if it's wrong, you're going to have to take it up with Ben. But he said that the Chinese translation for a crisis, so crisis, is broken down into 2 symbols. Now, together, both of those symbols together mean crisis. But if you separate both of those characters, one of those characters means danger, and the other character means opportunity. So that really resonated with me, because every moment of hardship, and especially last year, I'm a firm believer that any crisis that we go through, any hardship, there is always an opportunity to be able to see it. And if you look hard enough, I promise you, if you look hard enough, there is an opportunity in every situation. So yeah, I just want to leave it with
Brilliantly
that.
said.
Mate, what a beautiful full stop. And I am a bit nervous. I'm out of a job, but mate, you can deliver that whenever you want, buddy. That was awesome. But again, mate, from everyone here at the Property Couch, everyone listening to this, thanks for being so transparent, sharing your story, and we appreciate you swinging by the Property Couch.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Bryce. Have a good one. Stay safe, all right?
Well, Ben, I said that was an interview in 2 parts, and it was definitely an interview of 2 parts.
Yeah, I mean, it could have ended really badly for Ricky and his family and everything like that. To have an event like he had, mental health, we've always said this in terms of your health is your wealth. So for him to fight through that period in his life where, purpose and reason were questioned, but then to find gravity and texture and context in all of that is his family and his daughter, to be able to do that. And for me, this is also about the winning formula that is in terms of having an unbelievable partner who can ride through that with you. Lindsay was, incredible. She remains that rock, that supporting person. And, when you're in partnership, that's what it's about for for better, for poor, for richer, for worse, all of that part is really true. So, it's a testimony to what they've been able to do. But two parts: debt problems, consumer debt, just transformative. This is what the podcast is about. These summer series stories is about from go to woe to, from Pain Island to Pleasure Island. Well, Ricky, Lindsay, their family, they're on that course. They're on that journey. And so it's a really, for me, a super motivating story. And I could have a beer with Ricky. It'd be a long chat. I reckon we could have a great long chat because he's got a lot going for him, and he's certainly got that right mindset now. So all power to him, and it was a really important story that he needed to tell to help others.
And folks, if you are feeling any form of anxiety or depression, there are resources, and if you feel that is something that you're resonating with, we'd certainly love you to reach out to the multitude of people that are out there that can help you. We'll put some details in the show notes. But
Beyond Blue, all of those helplines are all out there to if you're experiencing Lifeline, those types. Please, we understand, the ball's not rolling in everyone's favor all of the time. So if you're having a tough time of it, please look at those resources.
And that's important. But Ben, I always say I'm an amateur at this stuff. But what I do note there was a mindset minute I did late last year, where I said depression is where you're focusing too much on the past, and anxiety is when you're focusing too much on the future, and peace is when you're actually focusing on the present. And I think what I observed from what Ricky was saying, and again, absolute amateur at this stuff, and I'm not trying to pretend other than just to try and share some of my own wisdom along the way, is that whenever you're making external references to who you are, that is where my observation is that a lot of people get into a bit of mental grief. So the quicker that you can learn to have your own internal reference about who you are, the quicker you are about having some of that peace. Because if you think about some of the ways that Ricky came back was from journaling, from meditation, from yoga. They're all practices that are trying to keep you in the present rather than sort of dwelling on anything that's happened in the past or focusing on anything that you're trying to cash tomorrow's check today, worries that you've got there. So again, if you're feeling this, go to someone who is suitably qualified and suitably experienced. But what I have observed in my own amateur way, Ben, is the quicker that you can get centered on having a great story that you tell yourself based on you being the resource of whether you're a good or a bad person, rather than the job, the person, whatever the circumstances externally are, the better you are. And hopefully Ricky has stirred up some action for someone to go and take so that they can enjoy the peace.
And a shout out to you, mate. Terrific food for thought there. Thank you for sharing that. That's really valuable stuff, right? So thank you.
Yeah, no pleasure. Thank you, mate. But thank you, Ricky. You were super vulnerable. Wow. So, but really good story. And we're super excited to see what impact your story will have on our community. So there you go, Ben. But Ben, we're halfway through the first month of the year. So I just want to shout out to anyone who has got New Year's resolutions and they're starting to get a bit wobbly on those. What I do want to encourage you to do is get your house in order, get your money in order. I really want to challenge you to make 2022 your year. Get on top of your money. Go to makemoneysimpleagain.com.au. Download the instruction guide, which will then give you the opportunity to get the platform that we've been talking about on these summer series so that you get trapping more surplus. Now, you may invest that surplus in lifestyle, Ben, that's fine. You may invest in the future around residential property or shares or art or whatever it is for you, but just go and trap more surplus. And we are well and truly on the way to an amazing 2022. So I'd certainly encourage you to do that. But
50,000 people, Bryce, 50,000 aspiring Australians are registered on the platform. Just to give you an idea of basically that movement, the mission, the crusade that we're on, entrapping that money and making it work harder for you, they're the people who are taking action. So that should resonate for a lot of people to sort of say, I need to be a part of this transformation journey.
And Ben, you can actually compare yourself to those 50,000 people, which is the really cool part. It's called Money Fit. But mate, until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Well said. See you next week, folks.
Hey guys, Bryce here again. Just want to catch you before you go and let you know, if you're new to our community, there are a lot of episodes to catch up on, but it's really important that you start from the very beginning at episode number 1. Because episode 1 through to 20 share all of the foundational pillars and frameworks that you need to know to get the best out of listening to this podcast. So I'd recommend that you start there, and the little tip is to maybe start on 1.5 speed. Now, for those of you that are time poor and don't have time to go back from the beginning, don't worry, we've got you covered as well, because we've created a binge guide that goes through all of the details and makes it easy for you to read and get up to speed very, very quickly. So if you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, you will be able to download that binge guide and you will be up to speed in no time. And whilst you're there, I've got a few extra goodies for you, because we have our top 5 frameworks that you'll learn on this podcast, as well as the Make Money Simple Again ebook, which will help you with the foundations of basic money management, so you'll have everything you need to succeed in building your own lifestyle design and getting the best out of this podcast. Now, just a reminder that anything that we cover on this podcast is not considered financial advice. We certainly recommend that you get your unique circumstances looked at by your individual advisor, and everything we talk about is just general in nature. To thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, and you can go and get all those goodies and catch up right away.